My name is Ike, 32 years old, and I was always Grandpa Harold's favorite. We spent countless hours in his woodshop, the sawdust floating in sunbeams as he taught me our family craft. When he passed, I thought my grief was the worst pain I would feel. Then came the will reading. The way my parents and brother Jason looked at me that day in the lawyer's office still haunts me. Their eyes said it all. I did not deserve what was coming to me. Before I tell you how my parents tried to steal my inheritance, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe so you never miss another true story. Growing up in the Anderson household meant living under strict rules and unequal expectations. My father, Frank, ran our home like a military camp. He demanded excellence, but measured it differently between his sons. My mother, Diana, was gentle but powerless against Dad's iron will. She would comfort me in private, but never challenge him publicly. Between us stood my older brother Jason, the golden child who could do no wrong. Jason was everything I was not in my father's eyes. 3 years older, he excelled in football and brought home trophies that Dad proudly displayed in our living room cabinet. His average grades were celebrated, while my honor roll achievements barely received acknowledgement. "That's what you're supposed to do," Dad would say whenever I showed him my report card. When Jason scored the winning touchdown at his high school championship game, Dad bought him a used car. When I won the state science fair, I got a pat on the back and a reminder to clean my room. The only place I truly felt valued was in Grandpa Harold's woodshop. My grandfather was my father's father, but they could not have been more different. Where Dad was rigid and cold, Grandpa was patient and warm. His hands, marked by decades of craftsmanship, would guide mine as he taught me to feel the grain of the wood. "Wood speaks to those who listen," he told me when I was just 10. Most people are too busy to hear it. Grandpa Harold had built the family woodshop from nothing after returning from Vietnam. What started as therapy for his war wounds became a thriving business, crafting custom furniture for 3 generations. The smell of cedar and pine, the sound of his old radio playing Johnny Cash, and the patience with which he approached each project became my sanctuary. While Jason spent weekends at football games and parties, I disappeared into Grandpa's world of sawdust and varnish. By 14, I could identify 20 different wood types by sight and touch. By 16, I had designed my first chair under Grandpa's guidance. "You have the gift, Ike," he would say, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "You see what the wood wants to become." My father scoffed at these compliments. "Making furniture is fine as a hobby," he would tell me. "But real success means wearing a suit, not sawdust." Jason followed Dad's blueprint perfectly. He studied business administration in high school, joined all the right clubs, and talked endlessly about his future corporate empire. Dad invested both emotionally and financially in Jason's ambitions, setting up a college fund exclusively for him, despite my grandparents' protests about the unfairness. "Jason needs the support," Dad explained to them during a tense Thanksgiving dinner when I was 15. "He's going places. Ike will be fine with scholarships if he wants to go to college." My 16th birthday marked a turning point in my relationship with Grandpa Harold. While my parents forgot until the last minute and hastily bought me a gift card, Grandpa presented me with a hand-carved wooden box. Inside was an antique wood carving knife with an intricate handle made of burled maple. "This belonged to my father and his father before him," Grandpa said, placing it in my hands. "5 generations of Anderson men have created with this blade. One day you will understand its true value." I treasured that knife more than anything I had ever owned. The blade was still sharp, the handle worn smooth from decades of use. My father glanced at it dismissively, but I saw something flash in his eyes. Was it jealousy? Resentment? Whatever it was, it deepened the invisible line drawn between us. As high school progressed, my talent for woodworking expanded into design. I filled sketchbooks with furniture concepts, combining traditional techniques with modern aesthetics. Grandpa encouraged me to pursue design school, often slipping me money that I saved for college applications. Your vision should not be limited by what others think is practical, he advised, as we restored an antique dresser together. The greatest craftsmen are those who can imagine what does not yet exist. Meanwhile, Jason continued receiving praise and resources from our parents. Dad paid for SAT prep courses for him, while telling me to study from library books. Mom drove Jason to networking events with Dad's business associates, but was too busy to take me to a portfolio review day at a design school 2 hours away. Grandpa drove me instead, beaming with pride as the reviewers praised my work. The inequality was stark, but I found solace in my connection with Grandpa Harold. Each weekend in his shop taught me not just about woodworking, but about patience, integrity, and finding value in creating something lasting. While my parents were investing everything in Jason's future, Grandpa was quietly investing in mine, in ways that would only become clear years later. The day I left for college was bittersweet. I had earned a partial scholarship to a design school in Portland, enough to cover about half the tuition. The remaining balance would come from my savings from summer jobs, a small loan, and the money Grandpa Harold had secretly set aside for me. My parents drove me to the bus station rather than the campus itself, Dad checking his watch repeatedly as if my departure was cutting into his valuable time. "Remember to study something practical as a backup," were his parting words. No hug, no good luck wishes. Mom squeezed my hand quickly when Dad wasn't looking, slipping me an envelope with $200 inside. It was a kind gesture, but I couldn't help comparing it to the $5,000 they had given Jason when he left for business school the year before. College life opened a new world for me. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued creativity and craftsmanship. My design professors praised my understanding of materials, especially wood. I worked evenings and weekends at a local furniture restoration shop, learning techniques that complemented my formal education while paying for my living expenses. 3 months into my freshman year, the family dynamic shifted dramatically. Jason's first business venture, a campus food delivery service, collapsed spectacularly. He had convinced Dad to invest $30,000, money that vanished when Jason's partner disappeared with the startup funds. Instead of holding Jason accountable, my parents mortgaged their house to cover the loss. "Your brother took a risk," Dad explained during our brief phone call that Christmas. "That's what entrepreneurs do. You wouldn't understand." I did understand, better than they knew. I understood that Jason had rushed into a partnership without proper vetting, had kept no proper accounts, and had signed contracts without legal review. My business management elective had taught me those basics in the first semester. While I couldn't return home often due to distance and work commitments, I made a point to visit Grandpa Harold at least once a month. These weekends became my anchor. We would work side by side in his shop, sometimes talking for hours, sometimes in comfortable silence broken only by the sounds of tools shaping wood. "Your designs are evolving," he noted during my junior year, examining my portfolio. "You are finding your voice." By then, Grandpa was 78 and moving more slowly. His hands sometimes trembled when doing detail work, but his mind remained sharp as his chisels. He followed my coursework with keen interest, offering insights that often surpassed my professor's feedback. Back home, the situation with Jason continued to deteriorate. His second business attempt, An app development company failed within 8 months. Again, my parents bailaid him out, this time selling their vacation cabin in the mountains, a property that had been in our family for generations. My graduation approached with a mixture of pride and anxiety. I had maintained my scholarship, worked nearly full-time throughout my education, and emerged with minimal debt and a portfolio that landed me a job at a boutique interior design firm specializing in sustainable furniture. The starting salary was modest, but offered growth potential and creative freedom. When I called home with the news, Dad's response cut deep. Interior design. That's glorified decoration. You could have studied architecture or engineering with your math skills. Meanwhile, Jason was preparing to launch his third venture, a cryptocurrency trading platform that Dad was funding by cashing out a significant portion of his retirement savings. Mom called me in tears one night, admitting they were stretched financially thin, but believed this would be Jason's breakthrough. During one weekend visit to Grandpa Harold, I shared my frustration about the family's blind faith in Jason despite his track record. I have an idea for a business, I confided, showing him sketches for a line of modular, sustainable furniture I had been developing. Contemporary designs using traditional joinery techniques, minimal environmental impact, locally sourced materials. There's a growing market for it. Grandpa studied my business plan with the same attention he gave to blueprints, asking thoughtful questions about production costs, marketing strategies, and scaling potential. "Have you shown this to your father?" he asked. I shook my head. He does not think anyone pays for handcrafted goods anymore. He says everything is about mass production and imported materials now. Grandpa's eyes clouded with disappointment, not in me, but in his son's narrow vision. "The future belongs to those who understand the value of patience," he said, running his weathered hand across a cherry wood tabletop we were finishing. "Fast profits disappear just as quickly. What we create here lasts generations." As my career slowly advanced at the design firm, Jason's third business collapsed even more spectacularly than the previous two. This time, he had accumulated significant debt beyond Dad's investment, leading to aggressive creditors and legal threats. Once again, my parents scrambled to protect him, selling more assets and draining their emergency fund. The strain began showing on Grandpa Harold, too. He worried about his son's financial stability and the family legacy being sold off piece by piece to cover Jason's failures. During one of my visits, I found him sorting through old photographs and documents in the woodshop's office. "I am putting things in order," he explained vaguely, tucking papers into folders with careful deliberation. When I asked if I could help, he patted my hand affectionately. "You already are more than you know." By this time, I had been promoted at work and had started taking on freelance design projects on the side. Each success felt hollow without my parents' recognition, but Grandpa's pride sustained me. Every prototype I developed, every client who praised my work, I shared with him. He displayed my furniture catalogs prominently in his workshop, showing them to his friends with unabashed pride. "My grandson," he would tell visitors, "is bringing our family craft into the future." The contrast between his support and my parents' indifference grew more painful each year. Mom occasionally expressed interest in my career, but always circled back to concerns about Jason's latest struggles. Dad hardly mentioned my work at all, dismissing it as making pretty things rather than real business. The family fractures deepened when Jason's fourth venture failed before it even launched. This time, he had convinced Dad to co-sign a substantial business loan, putting my parents' home at risk. The stress took a visible toll on my father, adding gray to his temples and lines around his eyes. Still, his solution was to work harder, take on consulting jobs after retirement age, anything to keep funding Jason's elusive entrepreneurial dreams. Through it all, Grandpa Harold remained my constant, my true north. Even as his physical strength waned, his wisdom and encouragement never faltered. "Keep building," he would tell me. "Not just with your hands, but with your heart. That is the legacy that matters." Little did I know how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how soon our family would be torn apart by the very notion of legacy. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. I was in the middle of a client meeting when my phone vibrated repeatedly in my pocket. After the third call in succession, I excused myself to answer. "Ike, it is Grandpa." Mom's voice trembled on the other end. "He had a stroke. The doctors say it is serious. You need to come home now." The next 4 hours passed in a blur. I canceled meetings, packed a bag, and drove 300 miles through pouring rain, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The hospital corridor seemed endless as I jogged toward the intensive care unit, my heart hammering against my ribs. My parents were already there, looking older than I remembered. Dad paced the waiting room while Mom sat with her prayer beads, lips moving silently. Jason stood by the window, staring out at nothing. He barely acknowledged my arrival with a quick nod. "How is he?" I asked, breathless from my sprint through the hospital. "Stable for now," Dad replied, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "The right side of his body is paralyzed. He has not regained consciousness since they brought him in." The doctor allowed us into Grandpa's room 2 at a time. Mom and Dad went first, then Jason, who spent less than 5 minutes before retreating to make phone calls. When my turn came, I barely recognized the frail figure in the hospital bed. Grandpa Harold, always robust despite his age, now seemed diminished, tethered to machines that beeped and hummed around him. I took his left hand, the one that had guided mine through countless woodworking projects, and held it gently. His skin felt paper-thin, the blue veins prominent beneath the surface. "I am here, Grandpa," I whispered. "I am right here." For 3 days, we maintained our vigil. I slept in an uncomfortable chair by his bed, refusing to leave except for quick showers in the hospital bathroom. On the 4th morning, something miraculous happened. As I sat reading aloud from his favorite Hemingway novel, his fingers twitched in mine. His eyes fluttered open, disoriented at first, then finding focus on my face. "Ike," he rasped, his voice barely audible. I pressed the call button for the nurse, then leaned closer. "Do not try to talk, Grandpa. You are in the hospital. You had a stroke, but you are getting better." He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Listen," he insisted, each word an effort. "The shop. Keep it in the family." I arranged everything. The nurse arrived before I could ask what he meant. She shooed me out to check his vitals and alert the doctor. By the time I was allowed back in, my parents had arrived for their morning visit. Grandpa was awake, but exhausted from the examination. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, speaking of rehabilitation and recovery time. That evening, when we were alone again, Grandpa beckoned me closer. "Top drawer," he whispered. "Office desk. Red folder." "You want me to get something from your office?" I asked, confused. He nodded weakly. "Important. Before they check." "Before who checks, Grandpa?" His eyes, cloudy with medication, still managed to convey urgency. "Family matters. Trust Willis." I recognized the name of his longtime attorney and friend, Thomas Willis. Before I could ask more questions, Grandpa drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I made an excuse about needing fresh clothes and drove to his house. Using my key, I entered the silent woodshop that had always been full of music and the sounds of creation. In the small office, I found the red folder exactly where he had said. Inside were documents I did not fully understand. Property deeds, business certificates, and a sealed envelope with confidential. For Thomas Willis only, written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. Respecting his privacy, I did not open the envelope but took the entire folder and locked it in the glove compartment of my car. When I returned to the hospital, something had changed. Jason was sitting closer to Grandpa's bed than usual, speaking in a low, intense voice. He straightened abruptly when I entered, his expression shifting from focus to casual indifference so quickly it seemed rehearsed. "Just catching up with Grandpa," he said, standing to leave. "He seems better today." Over the next few days, I noticed Jason visiting more frequently, always timing his visits when I needed to step out for food or fresh air. Dad, too, seemed unusually attentive, asking the doctors detailed questions about Grandpa's prognosis and recovery timeline. 1 week after his stroke, Grandpa Harold took a turn for the worse. A second, more severe stroke hit during the night. By morning, the doctors had changed their tone from recovery to comfort measures. We gathered around his bed as his breathing became more labored. In his final hour, he briefly regained consciousness, his eyes searching the room until they found mine. "Remember," he mouthed silently, his gaze intense despite his failing body. Then, with one last gentle squeeze of my hand, Grandpa Harold slipped away. The next few days passed in a haze of grief and funeral arrangements. I found comfort in handling the practical details, selecting a casket made of oak, his favorite wood, and ensuring his workshop tools were represented at the service. The funeral was well attended, a testament to the lives Grandpa had touched through his craftsmanship and kindness. As we returned to his house after the service, I noticed Jason examining the workshop with new interest, opening drawers and studying the equipment. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Just getting a sense of what is here," he replied casually. "This property must be worth a fortune now, especially with the development happening nearby." His words struck me as oddly calculating so soon after Grandpa's passing. Later that evening, I overheard Dad on the phone with someone, his voice hushed but urgent. "Yes, we will need to move quickly," he was saying, "before anything is distributed. I understand the legal aspects, but there are ways to ensure the majority goes where it will be most beneficial." When he saw me in the doorway, he quickly ended the call. "Just handling some paperwork," he explained, not meeting my eyes. "There is a lot to sort out after a death." 2 days later, I received a call from Thomas Willis, Grandpa's attorney. His voice was formal, professional. "Ike, I need to schedule the reading of your grandfather's will. Can you be at my office this Friday at 2? "Of course," I replied, then hesitated. "Mr. Willis, Grandpa mentioned your name in the hospital." He seemed concerned about something. A long pause followed. "Did he now?" "Interesting. We will discuss everything on Friday. Please make sure all family members attend." When I informed my parents about the meeting, Dad nodded as if he had been expecting it. "We will be there," he said. "Jason, too." The evening before the will reading, Mom called me to her room where she was staying at Grandpa's house. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. "Ike, you know we love you," she began, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "But family decisions can be complicated. Your brother has had some setbacks, and he really needs a win right now." "What are you saying, Mom?" She could not quite meet my eyes. "Whatever happens tomorrow, try to understand it from our perspective. Jason has plans for the future, real business plans this time. He needs capital to make them work." A cold realization washed over me. "Are you asking me to give up my inheritance to Jason?" before we even know what it is. Not give up, she corrected quickly. Maybe share more generously. For the good of the family. I left the room without answering, my mind reeling. That night I couldn't sleep, Grandpa's urgent words echoing in my head. Keep it in the family. I arranged everything. Now I understood what he might have been warning me about. My own family was plotting before his body was even cold. As I sat on the porch swing where Grandpa and I had spent countless evenings discussing design ideas, I caught sight of Jason and Dad in the driveway, heads bent together in serious conversation. Dad clapped Jason on the shoulder reassuringly. "Do not worry," I heard him say. "Everything will work out exactly as it should." The knot in my stomach tightened. Whatever was coming tomorrow, I was clearly meant to be the one losing out. The family I thought I knew was revealing a side I had never wanted to see, and I found myself more alone than ever without Grandpa Harold's steadying presence. Thomas Willis's law office occupied the second floor of a historic building downtown. The waiting room featured dark wood paneling and leather chairs that would have earned Grandpa Harold's approval for their craftsmanship. As we sat waiting, the tension was thick enough to cut with one of Grandpa's hand-forged chisels. Mom kept smoothing her skirt nervously, while Dad checked his watch every few minutes. Jason scrolled through his phone, affecting casual disinterest that didn't match the way his foot tapped rapidly against the carpet. "The Anderson family," announced the receptionist. "Mr. Willis will see you now." The conference room continued the theme of dignified woodwork, dominated by a massive oak table that could have come straight from Grandpa's workshop. Thomas Willis, a silver-haired man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a bow tie, rose to greet us. I had met him several times at Grandpa's house, but never in his professional capacity. "Please accept my condolences," he began, shaking each of our hands. Harold was not just my client but a dear friend for over 40 years. We took our seats around the table, my parents and Jason on one side, me alone on the other. I hadn't planned this symbolic division, but it felt appropriate given the undercurrents of the past week. Mr. Willis placed a leather portfolio on the table, removed his glasses to clean them methodically, then replaced them with deliberate care. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to clarify that everything I am about to read represents the explicit wishes of Harold Anderson, documented when he was of sound mind and verified by 2 witnesses. The will was updated just 6 months ago." Dad shifted in his seat. "We understand the legalities, Thomas. Let us proceed." Mr. Willis nodded and opened the portfolio. "I, Harold James Anderson, being of sound mind, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." He continued through the standard legal preamble. I found myself staring at the grain patterns in the conference table, tracing the story of the tree it had once been, a coping mechanism Grandpa had taught me during stressful times. "Regarding my primary residence and the attached woodworking shop at 1472 Maple Street," Mr. Willis read, his voice cutting through my distraction. "Including all tools, equipment, inventory, and the business known as Anderson Fine Woodworking, I bequeath these in their entirety to my grandson, Ike Thomas Anderson." The room went completely still. I looked up to find 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me, with varying degrees of shock and anger. "There must be some mistake," Dad said, his voice tight. "My father would not leave his primary assets to Ike alone." Mr. Willis continued, as if he hadn't heard the interruption. "To my son, Frank Anderson, I leave the sum of $50,000 and my collection of military memorabilia. To my daughter-in-law, Diana Anderson, I leave $25,000 and my late wife's jewelry collection." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Dad's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "And to my grandson, Jason Anderson, Mr. Willis continued. I leave the sum of $15,000 and my fishing equipment. Jason stood up so abruptly his chair tipped backward, clattering against the floor. 15,000. That is it. The shop alone is worth $500,000 at least. Dad placed a restraining hand on Jason's arm, but addressed the attorney. Thomas, this cannot stand. My father was clearly not thinking clearly when he made these arrangements. Jason is the eldest grandson, the one carrying on the family name through business. Making trinkets in a woodshop is not a real business, Jason added, his voice rising. My brother does not even know how to read a balance sheet. How is he supposed to manage a company? I sat in stunned silence, the words washing over me. I had expected to inherit some tools perhaps, or a small share of the property. Never this. Never everything. Mr. Willis remained unperturbed. Harold was quite specific about his wishes. He believed the woodshop should go to the person who shared his vision and understanding of the craft. This is about skills then, Dad demanded. My father's outdated ideas about tradition. This is the 21st century. That property could be developed, modernized. Jason has real vision for its potential. As a parking lot maybe, I found my voice at last. Or condos. Is that the vision you mean? Mom began to cry openly now. Ike, you have to understand. Your brother needs this opportunity. You have your job, your career already started. Jason has struggled so much. Struggled, the word escaped me as a bitter laugh. He has failed 4 businesses with your constant financial support. Meanwhile, I worked through college, built my career without help, and visited Grandpa every month while the rest of you were too busy. That is exactly it. Dad pointed an accusing finger at me. You manipulated my father in his final years. Turned him against his own son and grandson. Frank, Mr. Willis interjected firmly. I can assure you that Harold was not manipulated. These were his express wishes, and he explained his reasoning to me at length. We will contest this, Dad declared, standing up. My father was elderly, vulnerable to influence. No court will uphold a will that so blatantly disinherits the eldest grandson in favor of the younger one. Jason had regained his composure enough to adopt a look of wounded righteousness. My grandfather and I were close. Everyone knows that. This alleged new will suddenly appearing after his stroke seems highly suspicious. It was signed and notarized 6 months ago, Mr. Willis repeated patiently. Well before his illness. My brother has no business experience, Jason continued as if the attorney hadn't spoken. He makes little wooden toys. How can he possibly run a legitimate business? This is clearly not what Grandpa would have wanted if he was thinking straight. The accusation stung more than I wanted to admit. Though I understood the fundamentals of business through my freelance work, I had never managed something on the scale of Grandpa's operation. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I truly the right person to carry on his legacy? Harold made his decision based on many factors, Mr. Willis said, his tone gentler now. This was not a hasty choice or a recent change of heart. He amended his will thoughtfully and with clear purpose. We are leaving, Dad announced, gathering his coat. Our attorney will be in touch, Thomas. I expected better from my father's oldest friend. As they moved toward the door, Mom paused beside my chair. Please, Ike, she whispered. Think about what is best for all of us. This will tear the family apart. After they left, I remained seated, trying to process everything that had happened. Mr. Willis poured 2 glasses of water and sat beside me rather than across the table. Your grandfather anticipated this reaction, he said after a moment. He wanted me to tell you that sometimes standing your ground is the hardest thing a man can do, but also the most necessary. They will fight this, I said, my voice hollow. They will say terrible things about me, about my relationship with Grandpa. Mr. Willis nodded solemnly. Yes, they probably will. Harold knew that too. He made certain provisions for such a scenario. He tapped a sealed section of the portfolio. But we are not there yet. Take some time to absorb today's events. The property and business are legally yours now, regardless of any contest they might file. As I stood to leave, still dazed, Mr. Willis added, Your grandfather had absolute faith in you, Ike. He saw something in you that connected directly to his own heart. Do not let anyone convince you that you are unworthy of his trust. I drove back to Grandpa's house, now my house, in a fog of conflicting emotions. Gratitude for Grandpa's faith in me warred, with hurt over my family's reactions. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my phone had 17 missed calls and messages, all from my parents and Jason. I silenced it and walked around to the workshop entrance. The familiar smell of wood and varnish enveloped me as I stepped inside. This space that had always been my sanctuary now felt both welcoming and overwhelming. Running my hand along the workbench where Grandpa had taught me to carve my first spoon, I could almost hear his voice. Wood remembers the hands that shape it. Make sure yours are guided by integrity. I would need that integrity in the days to come. The family I had always known was showing their true colors, and the path ahead looked lonelier than I had ever imagined. But as I stood in the workshop that was now mine, surrounded by the tools and materials of a craft I deeply loved, I made a silent promise to my grandfather. I would not let him down. The declaration of war arrived 3 days after the will reading, delivered by a courier in a crisp suit. The legal document was filled with cold, formal language, but the message was clear. Frank and Diana Anderson, along with Jason Anderson, were contesting Harold Anderson's will on grounds of undue influence and mental incapacity. They were requesting a full investigation into my interactions with Grandpa during his final years. I sat at Grandpa's old desk, the one where he had sketched designs and kept meticulous records of each piece he created, and tried to comprehend how quickly my family had turned on me. The phone rang constantly that first week, alternating between legal threats from Dad and tearful pleas from Mom. We raised you better than this, Mom sobbed during one call. After everything we have done for you, how can you be so selfish? Your brother needs this opportunity. His new business plan could really work this time, but he needs capital. What about what Grandpa wanted? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Does that not matter to anyone but me? Your grandfather was not thinking clearly, she insisted. He was angry with your father over some old disagreement. Using you to punish Frank was not fair to anyone. I had never heard this version of events before. What disagreement? Grandpa never mentioned any conflict with Dad. Mom became evasive. Ancient history. Family business that does not concern you. The point is, your grandfather's decision was emotional, not rational. Surely you can see that. After hanging up, I wandered through the workshop, running my fingers over the tools Grandpa had collected over decades. Each had a story, a purpose, a connection to the pieces he had created. Could I really walk away from this legacy to appease my parents and brother? Would that not be the ultimate betrayal of the man who had believed in me when no one else did? The next morning, I received a text from Jason asking to meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed. He arrived at the local cafe looking uncharacteristically humble in jeans and a plain sweater, none of his usual designer brands or accessories. Look, this situation is a mess, He began after ordering for both of us without asking what I wanted. But we can fix it without lawyers and courts, dragging our family name through the mud. How exactly? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Simple. We sell the property and business, split the proceeds 60-40. You get 40% for doing absolutely nothing except signing some papers. He smiled as if he had just offered me a winning lottery ticket. That is more than fair, considering your contribution to the family over the years. The casual dismissal of my relationship with Grandpa and all the hours I had invested in learning his craft made my blood boil. What about all the furniture orders in progress? The clients who expect the Anderson quality? The 3 employees who have worked for Grandpa for over a decade? Jason waved a hand dismissively. Business details. The new owners can sort that out, or people can get refunds. The real value is in the land anyway. And that is what you care about, I said quietly. Not the legacy, not the craftsmanship, just the dollar value. Do not be naive, Ike. Legacy does not pay bills. That property is zoned commercial now, which means developers would pay premium rates. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I already have interested parties. We could close within 30 days. You would walk away with at least 200,000, maybe more. I stood up, leaving my untouched coffee on the table. The answer is no, Jason. Grandpa entrusted me with his life's work, not a real estate opportunity. His friendly facade cracked. You will regret this. Dad is prepared to fight for years if necessary. How will you run a business while defending yourself in court? How will you pay legal fees? We both know you have never had 2 nickels to rub together. The threat was clear, but so was my path. I would rather honor Grandpa's wishes and lose everything than betray him for a quick profit. Jason's parting words followed me out the door. Blood is supposed to be thicker than wood, brother. Remember that when you are drowning in legal bills. True to their word, my parents escalated the legal battle. Their attorney, a shark-like man named Elliot Kramer, began sending threatening letters detailing all the ways they planned to investigate my undue influence over Grandpa. They demanded access to all communication between us, financial records, even my design sketches that Grandpa had kept. What hurt most were the rumors that began circulating among extended family and Grandpa's old friends. Whispers that I had manipulated an elderly man, isolated him from his son, fed him lies about Jason's business failures. Some family members I had known all my life stopped returning my calls. Even Grandpa's poker buddies looked at me with new suspicion when they came to collect their belongings from the workshop. One particularly difficult day, I returned from a meeting with my own attorney to find the workshop door ajar. Inside, Jason was removing tools from the wall, placing them carefully in a plastic bin. "What are you doing?" I demanded, blocking his path to the door. "Taking what is rightfully mine," he replied calmly. Grandpa always said I could have his German plane set when he was gone. That is not how this works. Nothing leaves this shop until the court decides. Jason's eyes narrowed. I have taken these tools home dozens of times over the years. Everyone knows they were promised to me. It was a blatant lie. Jason had barely set foot in the workshop since high school, and Grandpa guarded his German tools like treasures. But it would be his word against mine, and apparently my word counted for little these days. After forcing Jason to leave empty-handed, I installed new locks and a security system on the workshop. The need to protect Grandpa's legacy from my own family added another layer of heartbreak to an already painful situation. A week later, I received an unexpected call from Thomas Willis. "Ike, can you come to my office tomorrow afternoon?" There is something we need to discuss in person. The formal tone of his voice set alarm bells ringing. Is it about the case? Did they find something to use against me? Not exactly. Just be here at 2. And come alone. The anxiety that had become my constant companion doubled overnight. By the time I arrived at Willis's office, my stomach was in knots. The attorney looked grave as he ushered me into his private office, rather than the conference room. Your family's attorney has been making inquiries about Harold's mental state in his final months, he began without preamble. They are building a case that he was mentally compromised for at least a year before his death. My heart sank. Can they prove that? They have statements from 2 of Harold's neighbors claiming he seemed confused at times. And they found a prescription for memory medication among his things. That was temporary, I protested. After his minor heart procedure last year. The doctors said the anesthesia sometimes causes short-term memory issues in older patients. He was fine within weeks. Willis nodded. I know that and you know that. But in court, they will paint a picture of a deteriorating old man, easily influenced by his attentive grandson. So what do we do? The weight of fighting my entire family while grieving Grandpa felt suddenly overwhelming. Willis removed his glasses, polishing them slowly with a cloth. Harold anticipated this scenario. He left something with me, something I was only to reveal under specific circumstances. He opened his desk drawer and removed a sealed envelope. This is that circumstance. My mind flashed back to Grandpa's urgent words in the hospital. The red folder in his office desk. Is this related? Possibly. Harold left this letter with me 6 months ago, with strict instructions not to open it unless his will was contested by Frank or Jason. Willis held the envelope between us. I have not read it yet. We will discover its contents together. He carefully broke the seal and removed several pages of Grandpa's distinctive handwriting, along with what appeared to be financial documents and printouts of text messages. It is addressed to the court, Willis said, skimming the first page. But also to you and your father, he began to read aloud. To whom it may concern. If this letter is being read, it means my son and eldest grandson have chosen to contest my final wishes. I am not surprised, but I am disappointed. What follows is the full explanation for my decision to leave my business and property to my younger grandson, Ike Anderson. Willis continued reading as Grandpa's words painted a picture I had never fully seen before. He detailed how Jason had approached him 3 years ago, requesting a loan of $50,000 for his second business venture. When Grandpa had suggested a formal business plan first, Jason had begun visiting more frequently, bringing gifts, showing sudden interest in family history. Over the following months, Grandpa had written, Jason convinced me to invest in not 1 but 2 of his business schemes. Neither had proper documentation or clear plans. When both failed, he told me they were learning experiences and immediately proposed new ventures requiring more capital. The most damning revelation came next. Grandpa described how he had discovered, through bank records Jason had carelessly left visible on his laptop during a visit, that the money had never gone into legitimate business accounts at all. Instead, it had funded Jason's lavish lifestyle, designer clothes, and gambling debts. When confronted, Grandpa wrote, my grandson did not deny his deception. Instead, he suggested I sell the woodworking business to provide him with real capital for a real opportunity. He told me the craft I had built my life around was outdated, worthless compared to the land value. He said, and I quote, no one cares about handmade furniture anymore, Grandpa. That shop is just taking up valuable commercial real estate. The letter continued, describing how Frank had sided with Jason when Harold refused to sell. My own son accused me of holding Jason back out of spite. He suggested I lacked vision for the future, that I was selfishly clinging to outdated traditions. Attached to the letter were printouts of text messages between Jason and Frank, discussing strategies to convince Grandpa to sell the business. In one particularly painful exchange, Jason had written, "The old man is stubborn, but he is getting forgetful. If we keep pushing, he will give in eventually. Or time will take care of the problem for us." My hand shook as Willis finished reading. The careful documentation, the clear timeline, the evidence of manipulation, not by me, but by Jason and my father, all painted a picture that contradicted everything they had claimed. "There is more," Willis said, indicating the final page. "A personal message for you. Ike," Grandpa had written, "if you are reading this, you are facing a painful battle with your own family. I am sorry to place this burden on you, but I know your shoulders are strong enough to bear it. The workshop is yours not because you are my favorite, though you have brought me immeasurable joy, but because you alone understand what it truly represents. Not just wood and tools, but integrity, patience, and the value of creating something that outlasts its creator. Stand firm, grandson. The truth has a way of revealing itself, even when others try to bury it under lies." I sat in silence, tears blurring my vision. The man I had loved and respected had seen everything clearly, had protected his legacy and me with the same careful planning he applied to his craft. "This changes everything," Willis said quietly, gathering the documents. "With your permission, I would like to enter this letter and the supporting evidence in our response to the contest filing." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Harold was a wise man," Willis added, his professional demeanor softening. "He knew this fight was coming, and he made sure you wouldn't face it unarmed." As I left the office, clutching copies of Grandpa's letter, I felt both vindicated and deeply saddened. The family I thought I knew had shown their true colors long before Grandpa's death. He had seen it all, endured their manipulation and disrespect, and still managed to protect what mattered most to him. Now it was my turn to honor that protection by standing my ground, no matter how difficult the battle ahead. The courtroom felt stifling, despite the air conditioning humming overhead. 6 weeks had passed since my meeting with Thomas Willis, weeks filled with depositions, affidavits, and increasingly hostile communications from my family's legal team. Now, finally, we were having our first actual hearing before a judge. I sat at one table with Mr. Willis, while my father, mother, and Jason occupied the other with their attorney, Elliot Kramer. The physical distance between us, just a few feet of polished floor, seemed unbridgeable. Mom caught my eye briefly, then looked away, her expression pained. Dad stared straight ahead, jaw set in the stubborn line I had known all my life. Jason leaned toward their lawyer, whispering something that made the man nod confidently. Judge Patricia Morno, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, entered the courtroom. After the preliminary formalities, she fixed both legal teams with a penetrating stare. "I have reviewed the filings in this case," she began, "and I must say I find it troubling when families cannot resolve inheritance issues without litigation. However, since we are here, let us proceed efficiently. Mr. Kramer, as you represent the party contesting the will, please present your opening arguments." Kramer rose smoothly, buttoning his expensive suit jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case is fundamentally about protecting a vulnerable elderly man from undue influence during his final years. Harold Anderson was 92 years old when he passed away, having suffered documented cognitive decline." I clenched my fists under the table as Kramer spun a narrative portraying Grandpa as confused and manipulable. According to him, I had systematically isolated my grandfather from his son and elder grandson, feeding him misinformation about Jason's business ventures and turning him against his own family. We have witness statements from neighbors who observed Mr. Anderson appearing disoriented, Kramer continued. Medical records showing prescriptions for memory issues. And most tellingly, a dramatic change in his estate plans that disinherited his eldest grandson, a successful entrepreneur, in favor of the younger grandson who had positioned himself as the primary caregiver. The description of Jason as a successful entrepreneur nearly made me laugh out loud despite the tension. 4 failed businesses hardly constituted success in any universe. The contested will represent a significant deviation from Harold Anderson's previously expressed wishes, Kramer concluded. We believe the court will find clear evidence of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity, requiring the will to be invalidated in favor of the previous version, which distributed the estate more equitably among family members. Judge Morneau made a few notes, then turned to our table. Mr. Willis, your response. Thomas Willis stood slowly, his manner unhurried and dignified in contrast to Kramer's slick presentation. Your Honor, this case is indeed about protecting Harold Anderson's wishes, but not in the way Mr. Kramer suggests. My client's grandfather was of sound mind when he updated his will 6 months before his death, a fact documented by 2 separate physicians who examined him specifically for testamentary capacity at my request. Willis described Grandpa's decades-long relationship with me, the countless hours we had spent together in the workshop, and my dedication to learning the craft he had built his life around. Harold Anderson made a reasoned, intentional choice to leave his woodworking business to the grandson who shared his passion and values, Willis explained. This was not a hasty decision or a recent change of heart, but the culmination of years of observation and consideration. Then Willis paused, his expression grave. Your Honor, I also have evidence directly relevant to the allegations of undue influence that Mr. Kramer has raised. With the court's permission, I would like to introduce a sealed letter that Harold Anderson left in my possession, to be opened only in the event his will was contested. Kramer was on his feet immediately. Objection, Your Honor. This alleged letter has not been disclosed during discovery. We have no way to verify its authenticity or when it was actually written. Judge Morneau raised an eyebrow. Mr. Willis, why was this document not shared during the discovery phase? The letter was held in a sealed trust arrangement, with specific instructions not to open it unless the will was contested, Willis explained. Its existence was noted in my initial disclosures, though the contents remained unknown even to me until the contest was filed. I have affidavits from my legal assistant and a notary confirming when Harold Anderson delivered the sealed envelope and his instructions regarding it. After considering both arguments, Judge Morneau ruled, I will allow the letter to be entered into evidence, subject to authentication. Mr. Kramer will have an opportunity to challenge its admissibility after reviewing it. Willis approached the bench with the original sealed envelope, now contained in a clear evidence bag, along with the notarized statements documenting its provenance. After examining them, the judge nodded. You may proceed, Mr. Willis. What does this letter contain? With the court's permission, I would like to read Harold Anderson's words directly, as they speak to the heart of this case. Given permission, Willis returned to our table and began reading Grandpa's letter. As the words filled the courtroom, I watched the color drain from my father's face. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat, then began frantically whispering to Kramer, who silenced him with a sharp gesture. The letter methodically documented Jason's attempts to manipulate Grandpa for financial gain, including dates, amounts, and specific conversations. It described how Jason had urged him to sell the family business to developers, dismissing the craftsmanship and tradition as worthless. Most damning were the attached bank records showing how Jason had misappropriated the investment funds Grandpa had provided, using them for luxury purchases rather than legitimate business expenses. I made my decision with clear eyes and full awareness, Willis read from the final paragraph. My woodworking business represents not just my livelihood but my values, my approach to life. I choose to entrust it to the person who demonstrates those same values, who will preserve and build upon what I have created rather than dismantle it for quick profit. When Willis finished reading, the courtroom fell silent. Judge Morneau studied the documents carefully, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Kramer, your response to this evidence." Kramer attempted to recover, suggesting the letter might have been written during a period of Harold's alleged confusion or under my influence. But his arguments sounded hollow against the detailed, lucid account Grandpa had provided. "Your Honor," Willis countered, "I have one more piece of evidence that may be relevant." He produced a small digital voice recorder. Harold Anderson made an audio recording when he delivered the sealed letter to my office. "With your permission, I would like to play it for the court." After receiving approval, Willis pressed play. Grandpa's voice, unmistakably strong and clear, filled the courtroom. "This is Harold James Anderson, recording this statement on March 12th of this year, in the presence of Thomas Willis and his assistant, Margaret Chen. I am of sound mind and under no duress. I make this recording to confirm that the sealed letter I have just delivered represents my true account of events and my reasoned explanation for the estate decisions I have made. I do this knowing my son and eldest grandson may contest my will and wishing to spare my younger grandson, Ike, from unnecessary pain and legal battles. The truth matters. Legacy matters. And choices have consequences." My throat tightened at hearing Grandpa's voice again, so vital and determined. Across the aisle, Mom had buried her face in her hands. Dad sat rigid, staring at nothing, while Jason looked physically ill. Judge Morneau took a long moment to review all the evidence, then addressed the courtroom. "Based on the documentation presented, I am denying the motion to invalidate Harold Anderson's will. The evidence clearly establishes that Mr. Anderson was of sound mind when making his estate decisions and was acting on his own reasoned judgment, not under undue influence." She fixed my father and brother with a stern look. "Furthermore, I find the allegations against Ike Anderson not only unsupported but deliberately misleading. The evidence suggests that if anyone attempted to manipulate Harold Anderson, it was not his younger grandson." Dad stood abruptly. "Your Honor, we would like to withdraw our petition." "That is your right, Mr. Anderson," the judge replied. "But be aware that once withdrawn, you cannot refile on the same grounds." "We understand," Dad said, his voice hollow. "We wish to end these proceedings immediately." As the judge officially closed the case, the courtroom began to empty. I remained seated, emotionally exhausted by the vindication that had come at such a high cost. My family gathered their belongings without looking in my direction, filing out behind their attorney. Only Mom hesitated at the door, turning back with tears streaming down her face. "Ike," she began, but Dad took her elbow firmly and led her away before she could say more. Thomas Willis placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Your grandfather would be proud of you for standing your ground." "I just lost my entire family," I said quietly. "No," Willis corrected gently. "You just discovered who they truly are. That knowledge is painful but valuable." As we left the courthouse, I noticed Jason standing alone by the parking lot, looking uncharacteristically deflated. Our eyes met briefly across the distance. For a moment, I thought he might approach, might offer some word of reconciliation. Instead, he turned away, shoulders hunched, and walked quickly to his car. The victory felt hollow as I drove back to the empty house that was now indisputably mine. The workshop waited, filled with unfinished projects and the lingering presence of the man who had believed in me when no one else did. Tomorrow I would return to his workbench, pick up his tools, and continue what he had started. It was the only tribute that truly mattered now. The seasons changed, autumn leaves giving way to winter snow, then spring blossoms, as I settled into my new role as owner of Anderson Fine Woodworking. The first months were the hardest, learning to navigate the business side while maintaining the craftsmanship standards Grandpa had established. I made mistakes, stayed up late reviewing accounts, and sometimes felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. But each morning, I returned to the workshop with determination, hearing Grandpa's voice in my mind. Patience, precision, purpose. Get those right, and everything else follows. 6 months after the court hearing, I discovered something unexpected while reorganizing Grandpa's office. Behind a filing cabinet that had not been moved in years was a small door I had never noticed before, painted to blend with the wall. Using the old skeleton key Grandpa had always kept in his desk drawer, I unlocked it to find a hidden room, barely larger than a closet, lined with shelves from floor to ceiling. The shelves held dozens of sketchbooks, arranged chronologically by date. The earliest ones contained Grandpa's furniture designs from his 20s, evolving through decades of craftsmanship. But what brought tears to my eyes were the more recent volumes, dedicated entirely to my work. He had carefully preserved every sketch I had shown him, every design I had shared, adding his own notes and suggestions in the margins. On the center shelf sat a leather-bound album labeled simply Ike's Future. Opening it, I found newspaper clippings about sustainable furniture design, profiles of successful artisans who had blended traditional craftsmanship with modern business models, and printouts of design competitions I might enter. The final pages contained rough business plans for expanding Anderson Fine Woodworking in exactly the direction I had been considering. A teaching workshop where new generations could learn the craft. Grandpa had not just believed in me. He had actively planned for my success, gathering resources and ideas long before he knew he would leave the business to me. The discovery renewed my commitment to honoring his legacy while building something that reflected my own vision. As the 1-year anniversary of Grandpa's death approached, I made a bold decision. Using the business plans he had started and my own design background, I launched the Anderson Craftsmanship Academy, converting part of the workshop into a teaching space where people could learn woodworking skills from basic to advanced. The opening day brought an unexpected visitor. My father stood awkwardly at the entrance, looking older and somehow smaller than I remembered. "The place looks different," he said by way of greeting, eyes taking in the renovated space. "But the heart is the same," I replied cautiously. "The traditional methods, the quality standards, those have not changed." Dad nodded, running a hand along a half-finished table. "You are using Dad's techniques. The dovetail joints, the finishing process. They work. They have always worked." I watched him carefully, unsure of his purpose in coming. "I was wrong," he said finally, the words seeming to cost him physical effort. "About the business, about what Dad wanted. About you." The admission hung between us, neither fully an apology nor easily dismissed. "Dad left me his military medals," he continued. "Did you know that? The Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, all of them. But when I opened the display case, I found a note from him." His voice faltered slightly. "It said, 'Courage is not just for battlefields. Sometimes it takes more courage to admit a mistake than to keep fighting a losing war. I recognized Grandpa's wisdom in the words, his attempt to reach his son even after death. It has taken me a year to find that courage, Dad admitted. Pride is a hard thing to swallow. We spoke for nearly an hour, not resolving everything, but at least beginning to rebuild some connection. Before leaving, Dad asked if he could return, perhaps learn some basic woodworking skills. I never had the patience for it when Dad tried to teach me, he confessed. Maybe it is time I learned. 2 weeks later, Mom began visiting regularly, first just for coffee, later helping with the administrative side of the academy. She had separated from Dad, living temporarily with her sister while figuring out her next steps. I enabled too much for too long, she told me. With your father with Jason. I need to find my own strength now. Jason was the last to reappear, nearly 18 months after the court hearing. He arrived unannounced one rainy Tuesday, soaked and subdued, nothing like the confident, polished person he had always presented. I lost everything, he said bluntly, standing just inside the workshop door. The investors, the fancy apartment, the contacts. Turns out reputation matters in business after all. Rather than satisfaction, I felt a complicated pity. What will you do now? He shrugged, vulnerability replacing his usual arrogance. Start over, I guess. Somewhere new, where the Anderson name does not carry my failures with it. Or you could start over right here, I suggested, surprising myself. Learn the business from the ground up, the way Grandpa did. The way I did. Jason looked skeptical. You would trust me anywhere near this place. After everything. Trust is earned, I replied honestly. But Grandpa believed in second chances. There is an apprentice position open in the finishing department. Lowest rung, hardest work, smallest paycheck. If you are serious, it is yours. He accepted the offer with uncharacteristic humility. The following Monday, Jason Anderson reported for work in jeans and a plain t-shirt, ready to learn the craft he had once dismissed as outdated and worthless. The transformation was not instant or easy. Jason struggled with the precision required, the patience, the attention to detail. He quit twice in the first month, only to return the next day with grudging determination. But slowly something changed. The focus required for fine woodworking seemed to center him in a way his previous pursuits never had. For perhaps the first time in his life, he was creating something tangible, something that would last. 3 years after Grandpa Harold's death, Anderson Fine Woodworking had evolved beyond anything he might have imagined. The Craftsmanship Academy now employed 15 artisans teaching everything from basic carpentry to fine art woodcarving. The custom furniture business had expanded, with a 6-month waiting list for commissioned pieces. We had even launched a sustainable wood sourcing initiative, partnering with forest conservation groups to ensure our materials came from responsibly managed lands. On the anniversary of Grandpa's passing, I closed the workshop for a private memorial. The entire staff gathered in the main room, surrounded by the tools and creations that represented his legacy. Dad attended, now a regular student in the intermediate woodworking class. Mom came too, having found her voice as the academy's business manager. Jason stood quietly in the back, now the head of our apprentice program, teaching beginners with a patience few would have predicted. As we shared memories and stories, I realized that Grandpa's true inheritance had never been the physical property or business. The workshop, the tools, the techniques, these were just vessels for something far more valuable. The understanding that we build our legacy through what we create, through the values we uphold, and through the knowledge we pass to others. Later that evening, alone in the workshop, I took out the antique carving knife Grandpa had given me on my 16th birthday. For years, it had remained in its wooden box, too precious for everyday use. Now, curious about a detail I had never noticed before, I examined the handle more closely. A small seam suggested there might be more to the knife than I had realized. Carefully, I twisted the burled maple handle, revealing a hidden compartment containing a tightly rolled piece of paper. Unfolding it with trembling fingers, I found a message written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. The true value lies not in hands that know how to spend, but in hands that know how to create. Trust those hands, Ike, especially when they are your own. As I sat in the quiet workshop, surrounded by the legacy he had entrusted to me, I finally understood the full measure of Grandpa's gift. He had given me not just a business or property, but a compass for navigating life itself. Create with integrity. Build things that last. Pass on what matters. The inheritance had never been about the money or the land. It had been about values that no court could award and no family dispute could take away. In the end, I had not just preserved Grandpa Harold's legacy. I had become part of it, extending it forward into a future he had somehow always known I would build. Have you ever had to stand up for what was right, even when it meant facing your own family? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of fighting for a true inheritance resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories of courage and perseverance. Remember, sometimes the most valuable inheritance is not what is written in a will, but what is carved into your character. Thank you for listening, and until next time, may you always recognize the true value of your own legacy.